Hello, welcome to the Viewpoint. I am Mumudu Mboj. We are going through a transitional phase in our national evolution, trying to move away from the autocracy of Yahya Jammeh to a democracy, which was in fact our post-independence embedding, for which reason we are now embarked on a whole series of reforms. But the one we've not been talking about, and we think the most important one, perhaps the subsoil of our being itself, is culture. So today, on the Viewpoint, we want to initiate a discussion on what it is and the related ideas like ethnicity and nationhood. What do these things mean? So to help me today to unpack these rather dense concepts are two titans who are preeminently qualified to do so. We feel like a minnow amongst them. I have on my right here Mr. Hausum Sise. He doesn't really need an introduction. He's a household name. Historian, writer, researcher. He's currently the Director General of the National Center for Arts and Culture. And on my left, I have Professor Balasaho. He's an Associate Professor of African History at the University of Oklahoma. He's also an author. He's written numerous books. Gentlemen, welcome to the Viewpoint.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mboj.
Yes, culture. First, I mean, I've read one historian. They said that they've got about, what, 127 definitions of it in literature. It is perhaps one of the most complicated concepts to define. So first, let us get rid of the etymology. Before we get into the groove, as it were. Apparently, it came from the Latin term colere. Colere meaning to cultivate, to till the soil. Right. Apparently, it started as a verb. Then afterwards, it became the name of a thing. It became a noun. Culture is what we do and all of that. And then, but for the sake of, in academy, the debate apparently started with Matthew Arnold with his book published in 1869, Culture and Anarchy. Then where he posited this idea of culture as the highest and the best done by mankind anywhere. The highest and the best. And then 1871 we had William Tyler, the first anthropologist at Oxford. Then he said, culture is a way of life. That was the beginning of that. And these two concepts have been at battle ever since. Your first response to this complicated word called
thank
culture.
you very much, Mr. Mboj, for having me here, and to my former boss, Prof. also. Well, I used to have a boss, Alaji Modu Juf. He used to say the same thing. Now and then he will, whenever this, question, arise, what is culture? He will simply say, it is the way of life. And then he will add, and it is dynamic. So basically, and I think, there's hardly, anything to add to that. I mean, such that, it's just what we, live through, today's experiences, such that it can be, I mean, like political culture, for example.
Right.
I mean, food cultures.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, it's basically what we live, okay? And, because, life, is ever changing, culture also, therefore, is always in transition. It's like, I mean, the ever dynamic.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yes, and just taking on from there, it has devolved into all sorts of things. We have subculture, counterculture, corporate culture, and your efforts.
No, I think you are all right in that sense, but I think maybe to understand it even better, we can think about it as tools and mechanisms with which we organize our lives. And in order to maybe even go further. For example, in order to understand even what culture really is, maybe we can think about it in different ways, so that we can understand it better. For example, if we think about culture as education, for example, or we say culture as environment, or even culture as policy, Because I think that's what the debate should be even about, right? In terms of policy and our pronouncements, you know, what do we do as a nation about this all-important thing that you talk about? So, and I think even to break that down further, I mean, we can explain this even further, and we can give lots of examples. For example, if we say culture as environment, and we can all look back to our villages. I think our villages are the primary locus of our existence. So when we go back there, we can find lots of examples. Panchang, if you go to Panchang or Salikenye or any other village.
Or my village, Banjul.
Banjul, example. Even if you go to Banjul, that are, you know, for example, I remember even in my village, even as a child, they had certain policies regarding the environment. You know, there are certain places that you cannot go there and find even firewood, right? They will say, oh, nobody should touch this place for this year, right? Oh, these are sort of sacred forests, if you like, or sacred groves, or, you know. And also even in terms of mangoes, they will say, oh, you cannot touch any mango until the village elder declares them the time to do so. So these kinds of...
So that's like culture as rules of what,
what
you can do and cannot do.
A way of, can we even say, maybe a policy?
Okay.
You know, it's the same way. But the most important thing also, I think, is what about if we even think culture as morality, right? Because I think that will be able to guide us as a nation. It means that we should be truthful, we should be honest, we should be disciplined, right? We should have integrity as citizens of a particular environment.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So we can explain this even further. You know, I mean.
So we go on next. We've already touched on it.
Right.
I, as an individual, how does it form me? Let's take a newborn baby.
Right.
How does culture form this person as it's growing up?
Well, I mean that's at the earliest stage of life, and they're also like a prof was saying, we really have to, get back to the seasons.
Sure.
Like, every season has its, if you like, subculture. Things you really have to abide by.
Absolutely.
For example, in the summer.
Absolutely.
If you are in the farming community.
Right.
It's, it's not, allowed, to be seen to be, like sleeping in the bantaba at 11 o'clock in the morning.
Exactly.
That would, elicit,
exactly.
like a negative, reaction. And when people grow up too, those are some of the, moral issues.
Absolutely.
That they should, really start, imbibing. At that earliest stage, he mentioned it. This issue, of timeliness.
Yeah.
Exactly. Our great grandfathers, we are never late. At anything.
Exactly.
Because there was, like a cultural norm.
Right.
There were cultural, values, which, guided. Okay. Events when they are supposed to happen, and who should be present.
Absolutely.
Before things happen.
Absolutely.
You see, now everybody is moaning and groaning about Gambian mean time and Gambian time.
Right.
When they ask me, I say, well, let us go back to our cultural norms and values. Like in the village, still now, okay, there are cultural ethos surrounding when things should happen, where they should happen,
absolutely,
and who should be present,
absolutely,
before anything starts to happen.
Yes, but again here, I will come in and say that perhaps they were like that because really there was no numerical time.
Right.
And perhaps one might suspect that maybe the village cycle of life might be slightly different from towns or cities.
I agree.
In that sense. So here it's like we've gone into culture, which is the common heritage, and identity, which is almost like the individual. How do I situate myself within the larger identity, isn't it?
That's
because
true.
part of it I inherit. But again, Once I come into this world, I have experiences,
Sure.
I have education,
Right.
then perhaps I may even begin to challenge that.
Right.
So how do you see this individual identity and that cultural,
Right.
sub base?
Okay. Before we even get there, I mean, I think what you just said, that is, if you want to see culture as the past, right? If you see culture only as the past, I think that's where we get mistaken. And I'm insisting that unless and until we study and teach culture more seriously in our schools, in our homes, not only Gambia, but the whole of the African continent will not develop. That's my stand. I may be wrong, but unless this happens, because if you look around the world, you will see that other societies, that is what they have done. They have invested so much in this so that people can have that integrity that I'm talking about. Because as you said, culture has to be creative. It must be a creative culture so that can create, so that we can have a good education. But even, an education that will also move forward. These kinds of things. But then there is what is called individual culture. But there is also...
I think that's what I was trying to call identity,
Yeah.
Individual identity.
Exactly,
I think
right.
culture is
because you can even think about culture as an identity, which I think is very important. For example, we as Gambians, or I as an individual, what is my identity, right? But beyond my identity also, what is my community identity, and what is my national identity? Now I think we need to define which one. Do we say all of these things are equally important, or what is it as a nation that we want? Because I think that we have to define as a nation where do we want to go culturally, so that we can create this cultural identity.
Absolutely. I mean, the reason why I asked that, I said that about the numerical time,
Right.
not that I was situating culture in the past,
Right.
but only that in the past they did what they did because of the circumstances
Sure,
they were
sure.
in, the
I
context.
agree with you
And
on-
then because technology is moving,
Absolutely.
one, you are a researcher,
Absolutely.
knowledge is moving, two, so we
Absolutely.
are discovering new things, so
Absolutely.
therefore there must be that movement, the creativity.
Sure.
Without that,
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yes,
sort of thing. So it moves on.
yeah.
So it will take me to my next point. Is culture a monolith? Or within the group, you're going to have variations.
Right.
Within what we call this concept, you're
Absolutely.
going to have variations. What do you think?
Well, yes, there will be variations.
Of course.
Okay?
Agreed.
But, I mean, sometimes also we can ascribe these, variations, to a monolith. Okay? Now, it all starts with, cultural education.
Sure.
And that's, like he said, that's what the colonialists did very well
Right.
in denying us.
Right.
Removing
Yeah.
cultural values
Exactly.
from the education which, they left behind. Okay? One, making sure that our education is not done in our languages.
Absolutely.
Okay?
Absolutely.
That
Absolutely.
was like
Absolutely.
like a victory for them.
Yeah.
Okay, if you want. Okay? And now, I mean, secondly, they also made sure, to divorce, what we read in the schools from, the life experience, like our life experience. Okay? Such that, unlike before the colonialists came, you go to the bush, okay? You learn the virtues of a society, integrity, like he said. I mean, bravery, honesty. I mean, timeliness. Cleanliness, and so on. All that you learn in 3-4 weeks, whilst you are in the bush, okay? So that you come out to be like a worthy citizen. Now, what Western education brought us was basically what I can call like a utilitarian, form of education, so that it's just you just become like an efficient machine. You can calculate, you can write a report, and that's it. About the virtues, the morals, the norms of a society, you are completely blank. Okay, and now going back to the culture as a monolith or culture in bits and pieces. That has been the debate, and he once did a paper on that, which I came across in the files. there was this dilemma after independence of many African countries. Do we all subscribe to one monolith and call it Gambian culture?
Right.
And some people who were in for that, they agreed yes, because they said if you go to Spain, there's nothing like Spanish.
Spanish, right.
You have the Catalans in Catalonia.
Right.
You have the Basque. You have the Asturians. Okay. If you go to France, there's nothing like French. It's the Corsicans. The Bretons
from Napoleon, from Corsica.
And those from Normandy. But what they did, during their process of nation building, was really, to erect this monolith and call it France and French.
Exactly.
And ask all this, whether you are Asturian or a Catalan or a Basque, you have to hold on to this single pillar, we call Spain and Spanish.
Exactly.
If you enter your bedroom, you can speak your Asturian, you can speak your Catalan and eat your food in your bedroom. But when you come out of the street, you leave it there and you only speak Spanish, talk Spanish, and think Spanish.
Precisely. As you
okay?
saying that, exactly. You have a similar thing
but
in the US.
About the Gambian experience, and he said it, like in his article, the Gambian experience after independence was no. There should be no monolith. There should be no pillar called Gambian culture. I mean, all of us encouraged to speak their language, do their culture. Mandinka can speak their language, do their culture, do their Kankoran. Jola, can do their, their Bokarabu, speak their language, do their culture, and eat their food. And our founding president, Salaro, called it unity in diversity. So the debate is there. Do we erect one pillar and all of us hold onto it and call it Gambian culture, or do we all do our individual, cultural, things, and all still, and yet call it Gambian culture?
That's an interesting one, because while you were saying that, I was thinking of Ali Mazrui in his book, The African Condition, where he talks about the triple heritage.
That's right.
While the native primordial element, and then Islam, and the Western, Christianity and science and all of these things. But again here, this is interesting, Kwame Anthony Appiah, the Ghanaian philosophy would remind us that if I really want to understand myself, I have to take the indigenous elements, what is within, and the exo. If I want to deny one, then there will be a problem there. Really, I wouldn't self-diagnose properly. But one thing baffles me though, we have all said this, the post-colonial state, why didn't it try to rectify culturally the problems you are saying? Why didn't it try to rectify it when it took over the powers and bring the institutions that would change this? What do you think that was? We didn't do much.
As Hazum is saying, when the colonialists left, our people or whoever came, our primary leaders, never thought that culture is, maybe if I say they did not understand, maybe I'll make a mistake, but maybe did not regard culture as that important. That because even now, if you look at development ideas, they talk about three important things, like education, technology, and culture. And out of these three, I think culture is key there in order to carry us forward. Because without, as he said, without that cultural education and cultural understanding, we cannot create anything. We cannot even create ourselves as citizens that will think that the nation is more important than the individual, as he explained. Because now you have anyway, let me even say that, like me, I did not go to God and say, please make me a Mandinka. Right? You did not go to God and say, make me a Wolof, right? Fuller the same. So even though that is important, like I'm a Mandinka, so what? I'm a Mandinka whether you like it or not. That's what I am. But I think we should think beyond that, and think as citizens, as he is explaining, right? We have to think about our country, which the Europeans left with us. Because other countries have done it. It's not magic. Because what culture really does is that culture does not fly you to the moon, right? But it gives you the grounding that can help you think about making rockets and all of it. So if you don't have a good cultural education, you cannot even think about making a rocket to go to the moon. I think that's what he was explaining in a different way, right?
And please, Mr. Mboy, I think we can be a be a bit more empathic of the post-colonial rulers.
Right.
Okay. They had cultural agenda. Some like Senghor.
Right.
had a cultural agenda.
Sure.
You know it. He had his own string
and all this.
of promoting.
Right.
Like Wolof as a lingua franca in Senegal.
Right.
And so on. Now, even here also,
we've got that, but when it comes to the bit of nationhood,
right.
I think that's really where
even here, there was an attempt. For example, our former boss, Alhaji Bakari Sidibe, started, the oral, archives.
Yes.
He knew that all these griots were dying.
Mm-hmm.
Bamba Suso, by Conte, the Jobates, the Contes, the Canutes, and so on, like the Halam Piles, Ablai Samba. So he said, let us record them quickly.
Mm-hmm.
But he was operating within the context of the state because he was a civil servant.
Right.
Okay? And, he was given money and transport to go around and record these people.
Sure.
To create the oral archives. We had the National Library, okay, created in the 70s. We had the National Museum, open, in the mid-80s. So these were examples, of cultural projects of the post-colonial state.
Mm-hmm.
Basically using culture, to reassert, the Gambian identity.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, after decades of colonial rule and dispossession, these cultural projects were now meant to legitimize, okay, our claim to nationhood, to tell the people that, well, look at our material culture, come to the museum and see, you see, we are civilized, and so on. Go to the oral archives, you see, the historical knowledge we have on science, on technology, and so on. So there was an attempt.
Sure.
So now, but of course, the ERP, Economic Recovery Program came, the IMF will tell you, you close your museum. And that's the point that he was saying.
Exactly.
How do we make culture produce money, contribute to the economy?
Right.
The IMF hardly allowed that. Close your museums. Don't spend money on libraries. And so on and so forth. So by the 1980s, so many of these cultural institutions had begun to collapse.
I will even maybe digress a little bit, or maybe even extend this discussion a little bit more, because even if you look at the post-colonial states, how much really are they investing in culture? I mean, you are a civil servant.
Yes.
You can, and the good thing, you are now the Director General of Culture. How much are we really investing in culture? How much is it?
Well, I understand. With Senghor, this was interesting. Apparently, Senghor spent 35% of the GDP on culture.
That's why he made a lot of difference.
In many ways,
how much? What is our percentage? We cannot even say it publicly, right? How much?
But now, let's introduce.
So that will not take us anywhere
at all. But let's introduce now ethnicity into the debate. Because earlier on, you mentioned the experience of Spain, the Catalans, this and that. I wonder how you would see it. And all of these things. And we all know historically that in the 19th century, they call him the godfather of nationalism. That was Johann Gottfried Herder.
Sure.
They had seen that perhaps within this patch of land, they are all speaking English, and they create England. And within that, mainly, you know what I mean, you go to France, mainly. So it seems as if the nation was built around the language. So today we say ethnicity, or tribe, or Khalifa calls it ethno-linguistic groups. And so how do you see ethnicity within the wider scheme of culture, then which will eventually take us to nationhood? How do you see ethnicity and culture in a sense?
I always like to, say that maybe we should, if we see culture as ethnicity, then we can think about all these ethnic groups that we have. For example, many people like to call themselves tribes, which to me is absolute crap, because if you look at...
but you get the meaning, though. There's this group maybe united by language. It sounds quite
but
primordial.
It's not the tribe. Because as Hasum said, what Europeans did was that they used all of these terms and names to put us down. So by calling us tribe, what they are saying is that we were uncivilized race of people.
But they also had tribes. I see now,
but they
in
never
England,
use it.
for instance.
The bigger Europeans don't use it now against themselves. But they only use it, say, if you go to other countries, they use it against smaller groups or groups that they want to keep away. You will never hear now a European calling himself the English
tribes and all of that. That's it. But remember as well, with them, what I hear historians over there say is that, for instance, in Britain, they had, some from Wessex, or I see now Boudica, the famous Boudica. So what really allowed them to move away from the cultural bit was the Roman invasion. Then it had to create Britain. So they bring the same parallels, don't they? They said that their colonialism, you see, they think from that history, their colonialism would allow us to move away from these tribes then to build the nation. What do you think about that argument?
Well, I mean, for ethnicity, it's a very, very interesting issue. And I think, first of all, there is a Western logic to this. And it is that Africans have this, primordial, almost, if you like, this atavistic inclination to fight one another. For example, that ethnic groups in Africa have always had reason to kill one another, which is not true. So that logic is not true. As a historian, he has done some some research, particularly on the traditional peace mechanisms, and you will see that in the history there has never been a time,
of course,
when, for example, the Fullers, waged war against the Mandinkas, just because there's this primordial, inclination to to do so. No, even the Battle of Kansala, 1867, which pitted the Fuller, against the Mandinka army. It was a fight for power. You had the Fuller hotheads like Alpha Molo, who wanted to, break away, from the Manding hegemony of Kabu. And that's it. But not that they hated them, no. Absolutely. They just wanted, political power. Absolutely. So African ethnicities have been living together in peace and harmony all along. Absolutely. Such that if...
But we had our wars.
But for control of resources,
it was never ethnic, though. It was never purely ethnic.
You fight over a patch of water, over a patch of land, or over a patch of pasture. But definitely not because you just you had this genocidal. Tendency. No, African groups have lived together. Absolutely. For example, he is like a de-ethnicized. Gambian. Born in Badibu, grew up in Banjul. His wolof is better than even mine. And it's like that. People are multilingual. Absolutely. We are bilingual. So this logic of ethnicity, being negative, is a Western one, and it is wrong, because African ethnic groups, particularly in the Gambia, have always lived together in harmony.
That's it. Absolutely. So in the post-colonial state, it should have been easier, because with us, the state is not determined by linguistics, by the language. We have all these linguistic groups. We are coming together. Then it should have been easier. Yet the history shows that the tribal wars, the civil wars, and all of these things. So what is the canker? What has infected that relationship?
Between... I think one is, as Hasum said, even during the colonial state, never really made any efforts to bring us together, because their main interest was to divide us so they can rule us. And the post-colonial state also found advantage in this. They took advantage of this fractured system, and they continued it without really fixing it. That's what I'm saying. They never really fixed this fracture that the Europeans brought. So now I think one of the best ways might be to create, as Hasum said, even at primary level, we create a culturally based education system. Because that will help us. Like all of us, we all went to the same schools, and we all belong to different ethnic groups. Now we don't even think, it doesn't even come to your mind that I'm Wolof or I'm Mandinka, right? But our relationship is far beyond that. But I think education brought that up. So is it possible to transform that also to other people living in the villages? But even in the villages now you have different groups. They all go to the same well, they all travel on the same road, they all dress the same, right? If government, you cannot say, I'm making this road, no Mandinka will travel on this road, right? If you make a road, would you stop Mandinkas from walking on it? No. If you collect tax, would that be Mandinka money, or you'll say, oh, this is, or even if you steal government money, are you stealing only Wolof money? You are affecting all of us, right? So I think there should be a way for us to sort of create this, not only a dialogue, but create a form of education that will slowly eliminate all of these kind of negative thoughts that we have.
Absolutely, and from that education, then perhaps questions like, what separates one culture from another?
Right.
We've had these arguments for a long time. Right. Environmental reasons or biology. That was the old school from social Darwinism, from all of that.
Right.
So even here, you hear people talk about these things, their identity, as if it is immutable. It's a biological element. But now it seems as if, the nature-nurture debate, that's what we've come to now.
Yeah.
So how do you see it? It's important for people to realize what culture means, and this biologization of it has now been discredited, hasn't it?
Yes.
In the academy.
Yes, because also, I mean, there's this culture of peace.
Yeah.
Within our communities. And Mr. Mboj, I think we should really, look into that. Like he's saying, to, structure our education system to be sensitive to our cultural values and norms and assets, cultural assets, like the stone circles. What do they teach us, for example, just a good example. And also this culture of peace. Like I said, all our ethnic groups, you see, value peace. Like Professor Lamin Sani, whose latest book, I have a copy here. Beyond Jihad.
The late Lamin Sani,
yes.
He was professor of, was it Islamic history at
yes.
Harvard? There was at Harvard, at Princeton, was it at Yale?
At Yale. And this book, just about this culture of peace, he talks about the Jahanka and their contribution to the spread of Islam in West Africa through peaceful means. You see? So that he said, as people try to see how to put a lid on the jihadist threat throughout the world, they should go to the Jahanka and learn from them. How were they able, over a period of 600 years, to be in the forefront of the spread of Islam without shedding blood in their various centers? You see, so that our ethnic groups have that asset, that culture of peace, which also the modern nation states can draw from, to fix issues. The culture of peace, which is there to all our cultural groups in one way or the other.
Absolutely. Yeah. So your views?
Mine is like, for example, as I said before, if we think about culture as an identity, right? So you can, for example, you think, who am I, as an individual among a community, or do I think about culture in terms of community, or even now as a nation? So I think, and I think many scholars have said this, right? That if we want to remain in our ethnicities or as individuals, then we will have a much bigger problem, because we will always be in conflict, because we always draw from the energy of our ethnicities, right? And they can use us. So that's why it's easy for our leaders to use us and put us against one another.
Good.
Because do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
Instead of, but if we think that this is Gambia, this is our, unfortunately, the British came, colonized us. Now we have this nation state. What do we do with this nation state? I think that's what we should teach and study. One last example would be, for example, if you look at other countries around the world, that's what they are all doing now. That's what people are doing. They don't think about all these ethnicities that it's not important at all. Because ethnicity leads you to think that my ethnic group is, you beat your chest all the time. I mean, instead of thinking about Gambia as one people. I mean, I want to ask you a question. Do we have, for example, can you refer to a particular brand of music or a product that is really Gambian? What is it? We cannot even create a cultural product that we can all identify with. I think that's what we need.
Can I call it Kora Gambian?
Yeah, but Kora is contested. We can, but it's contested. Other countries are saying, Mali and other places, they want it. But can we create this thing? I think that's why if we can even think about culture as a product. What is it really that, what is it that really we have that we can be proud of or we can refer to and make us all one, all one identity.
But this is it, and you've actually you've given us the answer to some extent that things are contested.
Yes.
Therefore, the idea of oneness might be very difficult.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Mr.
But this is narratives are contested.
But what is an ideal?
We are having,
right? Isn't it?
Yeah, as an ideal.
Yeah.
But like I said, the asset. There is, the asset is there. Okay. For example, the whole issue of urbanization is good for national unity.
Yeah, sure.
But like Prof was saying, if people had stayed in the village, this country would be difficult to unite.
Absolutely.
Because everybody has only cultural familiarity.
Right.
That's only within your language.
Right.
If, for example, if he had not left, Salikenye, he wouldn't speak Wolof better than me. Because I can tell you, he would never speak Wolof in Salikenye. But because he migrated to Banjul, learn Wolof, and made friends across the ethnic spectrum. That is his experience, because I know him very well. And this was important. This is why the First Republic, our leaders were very ambivalent about urbanization. Okay? Why? Because now, if people leave the villages and come to Banjul and Serekunda, it's good. Because there is acculturation, people learn other languages, so we are able to build like one Gambia, one nation. Okay? But if we allow them to stay in their villages, you only speak Jola, you only speak Wolof. If you are in Salom, you can only speak this. That would have made the project of one Gambia, very, very difficult.
Right. Absolutely.
So this is why the whole issue of urbanization, should be seen as an asset.
Right. That's true.
For building one Gambia. So the more people come to the urban areas, the more it is going to be easier for us to build a united, Gambia. Because here, it's like a cauldron.
Sure. Exactly.
That's true.
Everybody melts in.
That's it.
But Mr. Moj,
so the idea, let me just add, so here the nationhood, the nation comes in. Then we find they use this term, the narcissism of small differences. So that becomes the problem, and then politicians would maneuver and tackle it and that sort of thing. So, and then we also must realize, isn't it, that there's no such thing as cultural purity. Because remember from there, you moved on. Yeah. Somebody said that culture is really, the history of culture is the history of migration.
Sure.
So,
I think he can speak on that because he experienced it. Maybe you can allow him to speak on that.
Because culture
how that changed his life.
Because culture is dynamic, right? For example, what really helped me is like traveling, living abroad. I think really helps me to understand even my culture better. Because now I can have a point of reference. I can look at other people and other societies, how they organize their lives, right? And then I think about my own society. And a good example is, for example, in the city where I live, my university is in a city that was built, I think, 1896. 1896, this city was 4 stones. And my village where I came from, maybe was probably 400-500 years older than this city. And if I think about it, if I compared it to my city, doesn't even have a running water, right? Why? And every time I think about it, I feel like crying. What are we doing to ourselves? You know, what is going on? Is it our state or is it ourselves? What is this? Is it cultural? Is this cultural why we cannot do these things? Is something wrong with our culture?
Absolutely. When you travel, somebody once said, when you travel, what you discover is yourself.
Exactly. and this small city has one building that controls the weather system of the whole United States.
And it wasn't always like that.
No.
It happened at a particular time. So there's really no such thing as cultural essence.
Exactly.
Maybe that's a bad argument. We can just move it out because of we are all subject to time and evolution and all that. What do you think?
Right? No, but you use the phrase cultural purity, which you know, it's a troubling, concept.
Absolutely.
It is.
Because that's like Hitler and his,
it brings us fascism and Nazism and that sort of isms.
Exactly. No, I don't think there's any cultural purity. Because if you look at, say, U.S. and many other, it's all kinds of people. In fact, they don't even care anymore about where you come from, how you look. They only care about what you have in your head.
That's it.
Can you add value to society? What kind of cultural product do you have that you can bring to the table?
Exactly.
And can this really move the whole society forward? Right? Can't we do that? And we, Gambia is only 2 million people. It's like a small city.
So when we come back here, when I call myself a Wolof or a Serer, with me I get confused.
Right.
The people call me a Serer. I've never been in the Serer community. I cannot speak Serer.
Right.
So when we call ourselves a Wolof or a Serer or a Fuller, what really are we talking about? We shouldn't really overplay it.
I think
it's important. I think it's important.
Okay, right? Go ahead.
I think it's important because, as I said, naturally, that's what you are. But you have not decided that. That is out of your, that should not be your primary focus, because this is something that you have not made yourself. We want to create citizens who can think, who can culturally think, creatively. I don't know how to put this, but we want people who can think creatively, not things that are out of your hand, because these are things you cannot control. If you are born Wolof, you cannot control it. But
Absolutely.
You can control.
But my relationship to this broader identity.
Right.
Obviously, we talk about different circles of identity.
Sure.
First, I'm male. if you're going to use us as a test, then it separates the different things.
Right.
So perhaps Amartya Sen, the Nobel Prize in economics in the 1990s,
Sure.
he used this phrase, the myth of singular affiliation.
Right.
It's not just one thing.
Yeah.
I am many things
Absolutely.
at the same time.
You see, absolutely.
My Wolofness matters,
Of course.
but it doesn't end there.
No, it doesn't end
but
there.
it takes me back to the to the issue of urbanization.
Yeah.
Even during the colonial period, you had these tenders.
Sure.
From November, December, January, February.
Right.
If you go to Bondali or to Bintang, like the whole Gambia is there.
Right.
Creole, Jola, Wolof, Mandinka, Sarahule.
Right.
Trading. Okay. Manjago. Everybody is there. Okay. If you go to, like Fatatenda, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
Okay. If you go to Basse, it's the same thing. You go to Nyanimaro, So all along the River Gambia, you had, these cosmopolitan, centers. Where really, the self, can, morph.
Yeah, or melt away.
Very quickly.
Yeah.
Okay. You are a Wolof, for example. You go to Bondali to do trade. You got a successful season. They give you a Jola wife. Okay. You stay. Now, before you know it, within one generation, the Mboj is speaking Jola, and assumes a new identity.
Absolutely, we've got it in Nyamina Dankunku. You've said Mboj, you go to Nyamina Dankunku. You see, we've got
so like he was saying, our focus should be on the nation. our ethnic origins are a reality which we cannot do much about.
Exactly.
But really, we can pay less attention to it and focus on the nation, like on Gambia. What is this? And see it as a project, which every morning, okay, no matter what you are, you come to this project site, called the Gambia.
Gambia,
do your bit. Of course, in your bedroom.
Right.
In your bedroom. You can be, Mboch, Jola,
or whatever you want.
So there's a private space and public space.
Exactly.
Well, yeah.
So the public space.
The public space to be Gambia.
Exactly.
Definitely.
In fact,
and that I wanted, Prof, to speak on that.
Yes.
I mean, on the public space,
right?
It should be Gambia.
Of course.
And really, and I think his experience in the US.
Of course.
Maybe you can just spend a minute on that.
Of course.
Yes.
Yeah.
There are a lot of books, or scholars spoke a lot about the private space and the public space. But the public space that belongs to all of us, like as citizens. And what Hazem is trying to say is that, is it possible now for us to think about something or create something that can move this public space forward, but as one unit, or as an identity? And this will be a Gambian identity. For example, is it possible, for example, to create a particular brand or genre of music that whenever you hear it, you know that this is Gambian?
But
like
we said purity. There's really, because even with the Senegalese, you see influences from all over the world, isn't it?
That's a must.
Okay.
You must have, because the world is moving.
Yes.
Culture also moves.
Yes.
People borrow from each other.
Exactly.
But at the same time, we must have an identity. Yes. If we don't have this, this dynamic.
True.
Identity also is dynamic.
Thank you. You're right.
I don't know if
You're absolutely correct. Yes. Within any identity, there's dynamism.
Exactly.
Really should be built into it.
Yeah.
But here, I'll ask something.
Right.
How important is language to identity? Some people do tend to say that because of the nature of our societies.
Right.
When I say, I cannot speak Gambian, if you know what I mean.
Yeah,
One of the languages, but there's no language called Gambian. What really unifies us linguistically is the colonial tongue.
Sure.
How do we deal with that?
Now I started talking about that earlier. Imagine we could, forge that out of the wood.
Wood, right? Oh, that would be fantastic.
Or out of the project side we call Gambia, we forge a language called Gambia.
Right? Sure.
But
maybe in the spirit of Esperanto.
Right.
but is it yes? But
unfortunately, it hasn't happened. But like I said, I mean, it has to do with the choice that our founding fathers made at independence.
Right.
They said, unity in diversity.
Right.
Speak all the 5, 6, 7, 8 languages in Radio Gambia.
Sure.
Okay, and that will be Gambian.
Gambia.
Yes.
Right.
Okay, some like Senghor.
Yeah.
They said, okay, Serer, Jola, Manjago, Pular, everything is fine. But for Dakar, we'll take all of, to belong to all of us. Of course, when you go back to your, to your home, but when you enter your, your bedroom, you can speak your Pular, you can. That was their choice.
Space, yes.
And like some,
when they're lucky, then it was just that their societies had evolved that way. By the time they came to independence, things were already there. Senghor being Senghor, he just used it and moved on. But with the language as well.
But be careful. Even here, there was even like, for example, during the colonial period, I mean, there was, an experiment, to teach Mandinka in the schools.
In the schools.
And even to produce newspapers in Mandinka.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, the colonialists were doing it.
Right.
Right. So basically, it was just a choice that our founding fathers made after independence.
Sure.
And said unity in diversity.
Sure.
I mean, we can build a united Gambia, but in its, rich diversity.
Right.
Okay? But like I said, Senghor said, okay, I mean, we will, be united around this language, at least in the public, space. And now in our own, private spaces, we can do whatever.
But still, the official language is French.
Well,
it has not been moved to it. So you see, with the language, with the language bit, remember, with me, the polar opposites of this debate was really between Ngugi wa Thiong'o and Chimamanda Adichie.
And also Chinua Achebe.
Ngugi changed from English, didn't he? He started writing in Swahili.
Right.
Well, Chimamanda came and said,
and
Kikuyu. So Chimamanda came and said, I do not feel alien from English language. This was quite a wonderful evolution. So the English language is just part of me.
I mean, because in the Gambia, because she's right.
Well, of course.
He's a writer. You talk about this, but even in the Gambia, we have appropriated aspects of the English language. I'm sure someday somebody will write a dictionary. Of Gambian English, which will be very interesting.
Gamblish. I've heard it being used now, Gamblish.
Right. but I think, Mr. Mboj, maybe this one, we do not need to reinvent the wheel. We can look at other countries and how they have done it. He spoke about the French, for example, during the French Revolution, for instance. This idea of, is it citoyen or of who is a French citizen, was very important for them. And even now, this debate is still going on. I think most of the conflict now between the French, people who feel that they're French citizens, and some of these foreigners, is all about that. Do foreigners really feel part of this Frenchness? How could they or can they consider themselves as French? Do they have to remove the veil, for example, to be French? You see what I mean? So I think that identity, once it's national, will really help us all, as Hazum said, in this experimental village, sort of to cast something out. And I think it's not difficult, because this is a very small country. It's just like one small town in the whole world, right? And I think if we have serious leadership or we have serious citizens, I think this is possible. It should not be that difficult.
Especially, especially in this transitional, because we are in a transitional stage.
Right.
So now, it seems what we've been saying is that culture is what we do.
Right.
Yes.
Sure. In the end, really, it is what we do.
I agree.
So now, when I'm given a government position, I take a bribe. I'm being uncultured.
Of course you are.
So this is where we bring it back to individual.
Absolutely.
This is
this also brings us back to
culture as morality.
Culture as morality.
Yes.
Exactly.
Because there are certain things which in those days, people will do it, and the next day, they die. Yeah. Because they have gone against the cultural grain.
Exactly.
They just do it. They do it.
Yeah.
I have been looking at prison records.
Sure.
In the archives. Okay. And I realized something very disturbing.
Sure.
That usually, like some of these chiefs in the colonial period or these notables, okay, usually they don't survive their first day in mile 2. You take them to mile 2.
Yep.
The colonialists, will take them to mile 2. In the morning, they opened the door and found them dead.
Yeah.
Because it's the, like the Kersa.
Yeah,
shame killed them.
Exactly, yes.
And all that is, culture as morality.
Sure.
Yeah. So that also is an asset which we can draw from, as we build like a new Gambia.
And there are studies done in this. The same Kwame Anthony appeared.
Yeah.
So he was considering this concept of how do we effect cultural change.
Yeah.
He said that what he discovered was this concept of shame.
Shame, of course.
Yeah, shame.
So when we become ashamed of doing certain things, you will change.
Right.
When I become ashamed of throwing my rubbish, my litter in the streets, he's going to clean it.
Right.
When I become ashamed of certain things, then perhaps that will be the beginning of our transformation.
Yeah, but even in addition to that, also even this other concept of, is it Denkane, like Wolof, like if somebody safekeeping, like if I give you something to keep, you can never ever touch that traditionally, right? Yeah. They even go beyond that and say even a witch, if you want your child to survive, just give that child to a witch to look after. Nothing will happen to that child. So that concept is also so important. That's why in the past, if people, as Hazum said, if people steal, if people or even offend you, they go home and die because they are ashamed, because they want to save their faces. You know, and face keeping is so important in our society. But nowadays, everything is melting away, and people can store away millions of dollars.
We're shameless.
Very shameless.
Shameless one. Some of us are shameless. So we're about to wrap up now.
Right.
So culturally, the nation right now, we're in transition.
Right.
What would you have to tell the kids, especially? Maybe we are old dogs, but
Right.
at least the children.
I think that culture is relevant
Right.
to our national projects.
Oh, absolutely.
We can draw from our cultural norms, values, practices, to build the Gambia that we want. To build like a Gambia of morality, like a Gambia of honesty, of peace, and unity. Linjatigi.
Sure.
Yeah. In those days, if you are my host, I melt into you. You see, I become, so beholden, to you. You see. So those are all cultural assets which we can use, to build the Gambia that we want. So culture is relevant.
Absolutely. And
Absolutely.
here, maybe the final word nearly, here he was saying that really we have our traditions,
Right.
we have our customs,
Right.
but culture proper
Right.
is what I do now,
Right.
which is very important because we
Absolutely.
tend to see people think that my culture
Yeah.
is really synonymous
Right.
with my tradition,
Right.
which tries to situate
Right.
my culture
Absolutely.
in the past.
Right.
What about the future?
Right.
Because if I need to be creative,
Sure.
I may invent things that my grandparents never did.
Never did. Exactly.
So this is
and that's why I think there's people sort of maybe mix culture with but there's a huge difference between what is culture and what are traditions and customs.
Exactly. Yeah.
Because tradition or customs, they can die along the way. But culture is always there. Culture is dynamic, and it's always there, and it moves. And the good thing with this country is that we still have so many elders around us. We have so many, elderly people, particularly who are even educated. And now and then you hear some of them in radios or on all this stuff. Somebody like, is it Bakausu or somebody like that? Whenever I listen, he's very smart. The way he analyzes his things, he gives good advices. And there are many people like him, who are very smart. And these are, I think for me, these are reference points for the young people. But it will all depend on whether we are serious as a nation. Are we really serious about this cultural project? Or do we only sing along and dance, which are just manifestations of our culture, like singing, dancing, all these things? Those are manifestations. But are we really ready for this cultural product or cultural reform that can move this country forward?
Only time will tell. These books, what about these books you've got there?
Oh, no, I had quoted, I had wanted to quote.
Right.
But time is
Yes,
not.
we've come to the end of this
Yeah.
program. I mean, gentlemen, it's been the most fertile, most fecund conversation here. I hope
And
that our viewers...
the guy is a scholar himself. So
I hope that
Oh, no, he's the professor.
the professor, right?
The inimitable.
You are with the
I hope that everybody, our viewers, enjoyed this program. Thank you very much for joining us. See you next time. Bye-bye.